Hello everyone. So after that last video, which was a little dramatic-ish, I calmed down, put on a big bright smile, went back inside the house, got through my day, and I started doing some research. I started talking to people. Um, Obviously I had a lot of stuff to figure out. One of the things that I talked to one person about was thyroid disorder. Your pregnancy can mess up your thyroid, and it can also, if your thyroid is messed up, look a lot like bipolar disorder. So I went and I got my thyroid tested. I'm still waiting to hear back. I'm still waiting to hear the test results from that, but I got that tested. I got really tired of looking at my symptoms as bipolar because that just wasn't helping. First of all, my symptoms of bipolar disorder have never really matched up neatly with anything that you find in the DSM on bipolar disorder. The main identifying characteristic of bipolar disorder is that you have periods of elevated mood followed by crashes and periods of depression. They don't necessarily have to go hand in hand. Sometimes you can have a period of elevated mood and then go back down to normal, and then have a period of elevated mood and then go back down to normal, and then at some point you have a crash. But there are always periods, like the key identifying characteristic of bipolar disorder is that there are periods of time where you just aren't yourself, and your mood is either very elevated or very depressed. You can have type 1 bipolar disorder where you have full-on manic episodes, or you can have type 2 bipolar disorder where you have hypomanic episodes where they're not quite manic, but you're still going through periods of time where you're not yourself. That's bipolar disorder. And so, I was looking at it and it was like, okay, so let's just say that whatever I'm experiencing started with this last pregnancy, because I just haven't had any of those periods where I'm not myself prior to this last pregnancy. So let's just cut out all that bullshit, because I've been trying to make sense of everything in a more, in a more complete sense. Like, okay, well, this is all going to make sense at some point. Like this bipolar diagnosis, if I've had bipolar, I've had it since my 20s, so this would all make sense. This would all be one complete package. No. So I just threw everything out before this last pregnancy. And forget bipolar disorder. I'm just going to look at the symptoms as I see them, starting with this last pregnancy. What the hell's going on with me? And I saw mood fluctuation, definitely. I looked at it and was like, well, sometimes I'm pretty okay and upbeat and everything's going fine, and then I crash, and then I'm okay again, and then I crash, and then I'm okay again, and then I crash. And I talked to my husband, and that's what he's been able to observe externally. And I looked at it and was like, okay, what you don't see with me crashing is the fact that I'm still not actually happy when I'm acting happy. I'm just acting happy. I'm just pretending that everything's okay. I'm putting a bright face on it, fake it till you make it, getting through depression as best I can by faking it until I make it. So, am I ever really not depressed? And when I have these crashes, is it just because I got tired because I was pushing so hard to act like everything was okay? And it's like, okay, so that would appear to someone like my husband who sees me on a day-to-day basis, probably a little bit bipolar, but again, it still doesn't quite fit diagnostic criteria for bipolar unless you count in ultra rapid cycling, which I think is actually a thing. But then you've got me going up and down like a yo-yo. That still isn't bipolar disorder. There's still nothing that's chemically causing me to go through these shifts. It's just that I'm pushing and pushing and pushing, like everything's fine, I've got this, I'm gonna be okay, and then eventually I just get tired. That's not bipolar. That's not what bipolar is. So then I looked at how I got diagnosed with bipolar, and I remember when my therapist first told me that she thought I was bipolar. I've talked about it before. She told me that, and I started laughing at her because I thought she was joking, and at some point she'd get to the actual diagnosis. But she wasn't joking. In my subsequent research, I've found that a lot of the time patients with bipolar disorder just don't accept the diagnosis at first, and it takes some time and some talking to convince them that yes, they have bipolar disorder. And so a lot of therapists, when they tell you you've got bipolar disorder, they really stick to that diagnosis because it's like, okay, it's going to take you a while to come to terms with the fact that you have this diagnosis because you kind of have to see it and realize that these mood swings you've been having, they do have a chemical component to them. There's something going on in your brain that's causing your moods to do this. And so, it makes sense that she would have really adhered very tightly to that diagnosis. But it doesn't make her any less wrong. When I was looking at my symptoms, my life, everything, there just isn't that internal chemical component that you see with bipolar disorder. And no, I am not an expert. No, I am not a doctor. No, I don't even have a freaking college education, but I have read every single flipping article that I can find on bipolar disorder for days and days and days on end, because that's what I do. And it's not one of those, oh, well, you must have been manic doing it. That's just what I do. If I'm not reading about bipolar disorder, I'm reading about snake care. If I'm not reading about caring for snakes, I'm reading about beekeeping. If I'm not reading about beekeeping, I'm reading about gardening. If I'm not reading about gardening, I'm reading about some ancient Egyptian god or goddess because that seemed like an interesting subject that day. And then I learn everything I can learn about that subject. And then I get bored. And then I find some other subject and I learn everything I can about that subject. And there's not that chemical up and down. It's pretty straightforward and consistent. I just keep going at this speed all the time, which honestly, if it sounds familiar to any of you, sounds a lot like ADHD, which is what I was originally saying I had. And when my therapist originally said, you have bipolar disorder, I was like, no, I don't. I have ADHD. No, you have bipolar. No, I have ADHD. No, you have bipolar. I was like, I don't go through the mood swings. I don't do the up and down. I've never done the up and down. I have ADHD. I'm distractible. I don't complete tasks that I start. I do this very consistently. It drives me up a wall. I'll start working on the dishes and then I get distracted with the laundry and then get distracted with changing a baby diaper and then I'll forget that I ever started on the dishes in the first place. It's annoying. It drives my husband up the wall, but that's been me since the time he first met me. It's gotten slightly worse as we've had children because that's a lot more tasks that I have to keep track of, which makes me a little bit extra distractible, but that's always been me. I've always been like that. She insisted that it was bipolar disorder. She insisted that my goal-directed activity was somehow a bipolar symptom and that people with ADHD cannot be that goal-directed or are not as prone to goal-directed behavior in her experience. I'm sorry, I'm extraordinarily goal-directed. People with ADHD can be goal-directed. I'm just assuming. I could be wrong. I've met people with ADHD and it's really frustrating for them because they can't focus on anything. And for me, I focus on something and it's the only thing I can focus on and I can't really think about anything else. And so I just keep going after that thing until I've gotten whatever it is that I wanted. I mean, yeah, but that's not entirely bipolar, is it? Because it's not got the two poles that are going up and down. Like, it just doesn't fit. It doesn't fit the DSM at all. It just doesn't work. I literally brought in a copy of the DSM diagnostic criteria so I could ask her, point by point, how any of it applied to me. She argued that even though my symptoms don't match the DSM, in her professional experience, I have bipolar disorder. And so what I ended up doing was I spent a month, number one, arguing with my therapist that I didn't have bipolar disorder, and number two, reading everything I could on bipolar disorder because I focused on a new subject and I was learning everything about it. And then at some point I discovered hyperthymia, which is not quite bipolar, but it's a predisposition to bipolar, but you don't necessarily get bipolar if you have hyperthymia. And I was like, Honestly, it looks a lot like ADHD, but I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe this is me. Like, okay, cool. And for a while, I was like, you know what? This must be a really awesome therapist because she saw this thing that nobody else has seen that, I certainly didn't see, and that's why you go to the professionals, You go to the professionals, you don't self-diagnose, and the professionals, they see things about you that you never would have dreamed of. For example, I never in my wildest dreams would have ever thought that I have bipolar disorder, but, I mean, this lady knows what she's talking about. She's been doing this for 30 years or something like that, so clearly she is the expert. And so I spent, I don't know how many months it's been, you guys, like you can go back and look at my videos and, do the math. I spent however many months being like, okay, I have bipolar disorder, so I need to learn how to manage my bipolar disorder. I need to understand that I've probably had bipolar disorder since my 20s. I need to, whatever. And the nice thing is she didn't recommend I seek out psychiatric care or medication because I've had this since my 20s. Right? So, like, clearly I've been managing my type 2 hypomanic phases on my own without needing medical or psychiatric intervention. I told her that I need lots of exercise just to stay sane. She's like, yeah, that's probably how you've been managing. I was like, great, okay, I have bipolar disorder, but it's a really mild case, and it's an unusual case, and it's not like your normal bipolar disorder, and I don't need medication because I manage everything with exercise, and everything's good. Cool. That's awesome. Good. All right. Got it. Except I still don't remember ever having any of those weird mood fluctuations, and it wasn't until that night that I was talking with our marriage counselor that my husband pointed out that in the 12 years that he's known me, he's really never seen weird mood fluctuations either, which is kind of the primary diagnostic criteria for bipolar disorder. You don't have those up and downs, you don't have bipolar disorder. So that leaves the ups and downs that I've been experiencing postpartum. And that could be postpartum bipolar disorder. I've been told that that's a thing. It can happen. Usually it seems to happen when you're younger, or at least from what I understand of it, it happens when you're younger. Don't quote me on that. I'm not sure. I'm kind of guessing there. But it seems to happen when you're younger, in your early 20s, when you first get diagnosed with bipolar. Anyway, it's just, that's the trigger. I'm a little old to be developing a brand spanking new case of bipolar disorder. I'm a little long in the tooth for that. But I mean, shit happens, right? And when I talked to the gynecologist, she told me, yeah, well, there are outliers, and you could just be an outlier. Except that it seems like everything that has to do with this bipolar diagnosis involves me being some sort of an outlier. You know where I'm not a crazy outlier all the time? ADHD. I'm kind of a classic case of a female with ADHD. Like a really normal person with ADHD. Weird as hell as a person with bipolar disorder. There's a lot of things with bipolar disorder that just aren't lining up for me, but ADHD, yeah, I'm pretty average for a person with ADHD. So maybe, just maybe, my therapist is wrong. This is like therapist number 5. For a really long time, I was like, I don't think therapy works for me, but I'll give it a shot. I'll go to a therapist's office. I will meet with a therapist in person. I am going to put everything that I have into this therapy thing, and, we'll see what happens. I'm doing the thing. One of my big complaints with therapists is the fact that I have to unload so much baggage before we can actually get to the point. And I hate that every time I meet up with a new therapist, and I've met up with several new therapists. It's like, look, I have a list of shit. You're going to think that's a hang up for me, but really it's not. I've gotten through it. I've dealt with it. I got some childhood trauma. It's okay. I'm over it. I got raped when I was 20. It's okay. I got over it. It's fine. Yes, I was a stripper for about 8 years. It's okay. Everybody needs a job. It was a job. I'm all right. It was actually very good for my physical and honestly my mental health as well. Yeah, I had to have an abortion because of medical reasons. Yeah, I hemorrhaged afterwards. I lost 3 pints of blood. I got a transfusion. It was very dramatic at the time. I'm better now. Um, you know, and I mean, I've had therapists get tripped up. Usually on the one that I remember, the really notable one was the one who got tripped up on the rape. It's like, wait a minute, you got raped and it's okay? That's not okay. You're not okay. You need to get in touch with your feelings. It's like, or I could just not, because that's a closed chapter in my life and I don't really want to hash over it for the next several hours. If I was doing this for free, sure, I would talk with you for hours and hours and hours about my rape and how you feel about rape and how rape is bad and all this stuff. We could do that, but I'm paying you by the hour and I don't want to waste a bunch of my money telling you all about a bunch of stuff that honestly you care about it a hell of a lot more than I do. Like, it happens. It was rude. It was a little upsetting. Dude, I've been through so much fucked up shit by that point that it didn't really ping on my radar, which tells you a little bit about the fucked up shit that I was used to, but this is my life. Like, this is it. This is what I got to work with. Like, I'm sorry that I'm not more upset about getting raped. Isn't that kind of a good thing? Like, after everything else that I had been through, isn't it kind of a good thing that that one just didn't really hit me as hard as it could have hit me? Can we just be happy that I'm not traumatized by that too? Please? No? Whatever. But that's 17 minutes of me talking, and I still haven't gotten to what was actually wrong with me, which, once I decided not to look at it as bipolar and just figured it as a loose collection of symptoms, then you start looking at it and try to figure out, what is this loose collection of symptoms actually telling me? People who develop postpartum depression, like anybody can develop postpartum depression. Sometimes it just hits you and there's no warning and it just kind of comes out of the blue. But there are also things that predispose a person toward postpartum depression. And one of them is just a lack of support. If you're pregnant and you don't have anyone supportive in your life, that can be kind of hard. When my husband got the brain tumor, he got it, years and years ago, but he got it, and then he started getting not so good, and then not so good, and then not so good. And as the years passed, it started affecting him more and more and more. It affected his physical health, but, that takes time to really visibly manifest in a person. Like, if you start getting sick, people don't necessarily see that you're sick right away. Like, people close to you who notice your day-to-day activities are going to be like, hey, you're a little under the weather. But the full impact of that, it weighs heavier and heavier as the years go on. So by the time I went through this last pregnancy, he wasn't remotely like the man I had originally married. He was a total stranger. And that was hard, because I was going through the pregnancy and I was going through it with this roommate that I didn't get along with very well to begin with. And I loved him, but you go through these phases in a marriage, which bad phases. If you're ever in a relationship and you start going through these, it's a bad sign. You need marital help. You need marriage counseling. As much as I might be frustrated and probably fed up with the idea of personal one-on-one therapy, marriage counseling can do a lot, because you're trying to build communication between two people. So there's multiple people already in the system, and sometimes those two people need a little bit of external help with their communication. It can be really handy. So I still think marriage counseling is a really handy thing, but for me as an individual, I'm just kind of looking at it as like, I don't think therapy is a good idea for me. Like, it just doesn't seem to work, and I'm really tired of trying. I think this is therapist number 5 or 6. I'm done. I did the thing. The thing does not work. I put everything I had into this last one, and I am done. But yeah, for me, I was pregnant, which is never a good time. You're always a little bit hormonally disrupted when you're pregnant. That's not so good. I didn't have my husband anymore. Like, he was gone. And it's been funny because since my husband started taking medication to shrink the brain tumor back down, he's been getting a lot better. He's been his old self again. And we've been, just this last week, we've been looking at pictures, like old pictures. And you can see there's this sparkle in his eyes that was there before he got sick, and it went away. And there are these pictures of him sitting on the couch, just staring at nothing, looking like his soul had dried up inside and just blown away. He just looked so dead inside and so sick. And I mean, outside of the world of YouTube, he and I are working to take care of him and get him back up to speed and get him healthy again. That's another discussion that, honestly, I know, because I know there's a bunch of manosphere guys who are always going to get up in arms like, well, what about your poor husband? It's none of your goddamn business. That's why I'm not talking about it. It's not me having a pity party and being like, oh, well, we care about me, but let's not care about my husband. It's like, that's his private life, not yours. So if I'm focused a little bit on me here, it's because it's none of your business what happens with him. He and I have been working to get him better, because that's important. I'm a wreck. I've been a wreck. I'm actually feeling a lot better now because I sat down and I thought about it, and I thought about all the accumulated pain that I've dealt with through the years because my spouse was going through this. Because when you're really close together and something happens to one of you, it kind of happens to the other too, not in the same way. Obviously, if your spouse goes through a car accident, you're not going through a car accident, but if your very, very dear, close, and beloved spouse goes through a car wreck and say they're injured and they need to recover, you're going through a process as well. You're going through a sympathetic process where it's like, oh my God, my spouse went through a car wreck. This person who's very close to me, is injured and hurt. And then you're going through the process of supporting that spouse, which can be very, very stressful. And you're going through a sympathetic process. So the fact that my husband went through a brain tumor, that didn't happen inside of a vacuum. You know, yes, he went through this very, very difficult life experience, and it's affected him in every area of his life. But I've gone through a sympathetic process, and I'm pretty sure that this whole mood's going up and down, trying to put on a bright face until finally I just can't do it anymore and I crash and I just completely feel depressed for several days, and then finally, pull myself together and try to put on a bright face again, and everything's going to be fine. I promise everything's going to be fine this time, except I feel like shit on the inside. Well, yeah, because I married one man and then found myself being married to a completely different man. A very, very broken man who was very, very sick for years. And that affected him in every area of his life, including his relationship with me. And then I went through pregnancies, one after the other, where he was increasingly distant and increasingly unsupportive and increasingly unloving because he was dealing with all of this shit with his brain tumor, and I was alone. And this last pregnancy was hell. It was just hell, and I was alone. And then I gave birth, and right away, I go off to work at Walmart, where I can't even hold my baby for comfort. And that wasn't a good thing for me. Like, I loved working at Walmart. I loved my coworkers. I love my coworkers. I went and baked a bunch of biscuits for them and brought biscuits to them during their break because I miss them. But it wasn't very good for me. I've been getting better now that I'm back with my family and spending time with my family and taking care of my kids. And it hasn't been good for my kids, me being gone. Like, having two parents who are working full time, they're not getting the kind of attention that they would get under ideal circumstances. So now I've been working on that with them. and, trying to recover. But just sitting down and looking at myself and being like, okay, well, maybe you're a little... There's not like a DSM diagnosis for this, but maybe I'm just a little bit fucked up because all this shit happened to me for years and I just didn't face it. And then we found out it was a brain tumor, and I didn't face it then. I just went back to work and worked more hours and got through my days and didn't deal with any of this stuff. I didn't process it. I didn't get through it. I didn't handle any of it particularly well. So what I did was I sat down and I got a novel about a character. I did my research and I found a novel about a character who went through just some of the stuff I've been going through. And I started reading the novel and I got about 5 pages in and I burst into tears. And I cried. Because I have a vagina, you guys. Sorry. I got through that, calmed down, picked up the novel, read another 2 pages, and cried. And I mean, I waited until the kids were in bed, so my husband's watching me go through this weird ritual of reading a couple pages and then crying my eyes out, and then reading a couple pages and then crying a bunch. And he's looking at me, he's like, "Are you sure this is actually helping?" And I was like, maybe, maybe not. There's a process. I'm going to try this out and see what happens. So I did that for the first day, and then the second day I started getting through the novel without crying, and I started thinking about a lot of things and trying to put pieces together, and that really helped. But the thing that really sealed it was I went on a date with my husband, and we started looking at all these old pictures, and I saw this very handsome, vibrant young man that I fell in love with, and I think along the way I just kind of forgot why I loved him in the first place. He had been for such a long time not the person I fell in love with that it was really hard to reconnect with him. I wanted to, I tried to, I went through the motions, but nothing was really clicking up here. And looking at those pictures, telling each other stories of all the things that we remembered from, way back when. The adventures we've gone through, telling each other stories about the abortion. Like we went out to the restaurant that we went to after I'd had the blood transfusion, spent the night in the hospital. We went back to that restaurant and we got some food and we sat down together and we're eating the food. And we're remembering like just all this stuff we've been through together. And it's like, I remember falling in love with him. And I remember the magic of that feeling. But more than that, I finally feel like I remember who he was before all this shit happened to him. And looking at him now that he's been on the medication and he's starting to feel better and he's getting healthy again, I can see that man again. I can see, he's still not himself. He's still not back to where he was, but he's getting closer and closer. And I can see just under the surface that beautiful, handsome, clever, just bright person coming back. And I really missed him. And so, I think after that day, he's been really, just watching me. Because, I've been having good day after good day after good day. And he's like, he doesn't quite trust it because he's waiting for me to, to crash again. Okay, everything's fine this time. No, really, I mean it. And he's been a little wary of that, but I feel a lot better because I think just facing all that sadness, processing it, dealing with it, realizing that, he's still there and kind of reconnecting with who he is, because he's just been this total stranger this whole time. Years of living with this stranger and dating this stranger and spending time with this stranger. And it's not like one of those, a sexy brand new stranger. It's more like, I don't know who this person is and I don't know how to connect with him anymore. I don't know what I'm doing here. That's not good. So, all of that I'm feeling a lot better. I don't think I have bipolar. I don't think I'll ever have another bipolar episode. Like, I look at the therapist, and the reason I think she thinks I have bipolar is because I had a really good day out of all those bad days. And I came in and I was like, you know what? I know what I'm going to do that's going to really help me to to mask the fact that I'm really upset about all the shit that happened so that I don't have to face it anymore. I am going to write a novel. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write a novel, and it's going to distract me from how fucked up I feel about what's happening in my life, and that's going to make me feel good, and then I'm going to be okay. I didn't tell her this. I thought this internally, but what I told her is, I'm feeling good today. I'm going to write a novel. Bipolar people do that. Bipolar people are like, you know what? I'm feeling really, really great. I'm full of energy. I'm going to go write a novel. It's going to be great. I'm going to be doing this, and I'm going to be doing that, and I have all the energy in the world. But, you know, people with ADHD, you know, they call it hyperactive disorder for a reason. And I write novels because that's what I do. Like, yeah. So I think she thought I was just going to go home and write for 48 hours and get a novel done in that time, which you need more than 48 hours for a novel, at least in my opinion. But no, I mean, it's like any other person who writes novels going off and saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to write a novel. They start writing. They write until they're tired. They go eat some food. They maybe go to work at their job. They spend some time with their family. They get a little chunk of free time, and they work on the novel again. And that's what I did. I got some free time. I worked on the novel. I had a little more free time. I worked on the novel. Eventually, you finish the novel, and sure enough, you have a novel. All finished. That's not bipolar disorder. That's just writing a novel. People who don't have bipolar disorder write novels all the time. So, yeah, not bipolar disorder. I've been kind of taking it a little bit slow for the last several days. Just kind of feeling out where I'm at in here. I won't rule out the possibility that there's stuff here that I haven't coped with yet, but I think I've pretty well addressed all the things I needed to address. I've cried a lot. At first it was not happy crying. Now it's mostly happy crying. I've spent a lot of time with my husband, just spending time with him and remembering the person that I fell in love with, and being really, really happy that that person is still there, because for a while he wasn't. And that's something that'll make you cry. If you ever go through this, that'll make you cry a lot. So I've been reading up on religion, and I've been kind of, I've found a nice little corner of the house, and I'm going to dedicate it to just a prayer area, and I'm going to spend time praying there. And I'm excited about that. And I was talking with my husband about that, and he's going to help me I was going to put up some shelving for some just, religious items, and I'm going to spend some time praying there, and that's going to be awesome. And as impossible as it sounds, especially that it's happened in such a short period of time, I honestly think I'm better. And I'm not particularly concerned about mood fluctuations or chemical imbalances. I'm pretty sure I still have ADHD. I'm very sure I have ADHD. I am always been one of those people who's like, don't self-diagnose. That's a bad thing. Don't do that. Don't self-diagnose. Go to the professionals. That's why they're professionals. After this experience, fuck the professionals. Fuck what the professionals think. I've met professionals who don't think I have ADHD. They think I just have depression or anxiety or whatever the fuck. Fuck those professionals. They don't know what the fuck they're talking about. I went to this professional who's like, oh no, you don't have ADHD. You have bipolar disorder. Fuck that noise too. Fuck all of them. They don't know what the fuck they're talking about. I have ADHD. And if I treat my ADHD as ADHD and develop coping strategies with the fact that I have ADHD in mind, I'll be okay. All this other shit, fuck that shit. Fuck what the professionals think. I have motherfucking ADHD. And that's all I have. I had some postpartum depression. I was having a lot of difficulty coping with my husband's brain tumor and all the effects that's had on my marriage over years of my life. You don't just get over that overnight. But I honestly think that I can say that I'm better now, which is nice because I haven't been okay for, over a year, not since this last pregnancy. So it's kind of nice to say I'm better. It's a little bit new. I'm a little bit wary of this whole I'm better thing. It's like, well, are you sure you're better? I think I'm better. I feel better. I think I'm better. So I'm trying to be more responsible and take my old responsibilities back on and get my life back in order. I fed my chickens today. There was a while where I just couldn't get my shit together enough to do it, and so my husband had to do it, but I fed the chickens today. And I'm going to set up this little prayer space in my house, like in our bedroom, and I'm going to spend some time praying there because that would be good. And I don't expect to be praying there every day, but it's nice to have a space like that. I've wanted that for a long time, and I just never had a room or an area that I could. And then I found this little spot, and I was like, you know what? There's nothing going on in this spot in the house, so it's going to be my spot now, and I'm going to use it. After I made that declaration, my husband looked at it and was like, that would have been ideal for a bookshelf. And it was like, oh yeah, one of those. That would have been good. Why didn't I think of that? Honestly, I don't know if we could have fit a bookshelf in there. It's a little bit tiny. I don't know how many books we could have squeezed into that spot, but it's my spot now, and I'm going to use it and just kind of get my shit together, because I think I can actually do that now. I think I'm actually in a place where I can start getting my shit together, which is nice. So anyway, there's the update. I need to do another book review video. I need to do some talking about the manosphere, because I've got a lot of thoughts that I've built up about the manosphere in the last year that I haven't really given air to, and I need to do that. I need to kind of let some of that out. Maybe piss some people off. That would be fun. Until then, I hope you are all well, and I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you guys later.